moving on to our top story, Home Secretary Priti Patel has said the Met Police is suffering from, quote, cultural and attitudinal issues, as well as failure of leadership. This comes after officers were found to have joked about rape, killing black children and beating their wives.
I mean, the inquiry's findings left the Home Secretary, quote, appalled and sickened. When asked about whether the Commissioner, Cressida Dick, will be able to make the changes required, Ms Patel said that she was this was very challenging with the Commissioner and pledged to continue to be so.
Yes, well, joining us now is Peter Kirkham, a former Detective Chief Inspector in the Metropolitan Police who served in the force for 22 years. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you think there is a widespread issue, an attitudinal issue with women in particular in the Met?
There's plainly a problem. There's plainly a problem that has got worse over the last few years, partly because social media has become available and created a whole new box of problems that can arise, and partly due to the fact that there hasn't been proper control kept on the attitudes and beliefs of the officers, especially the newer officers that have been recruited and are now the backbone of frontline policing.
Now, you mentioned social media, but do you not think, I mean, this, for me, feels like something that's been endemic in the force, actually, for as long as perhaps if people can remember. But social media has actually highlighted that people are actually putting this down on paper now, or online, as it were, so people can actually read this stuff and then put the narrative together and actually think and say that this is not acceptable. We spoke to an inspector yesterday who said that these are one-offs. But in your eyes, is it endemic, or is it just a couple of little incidents here or there?
I think the attitude generally may well be more widespread. I think the extremes that we've seen in this particular case, I think, and I certainly would hope that they are a lot rarer. But the attitude, more general attitude, I think probably is endemic. The police service, just like an awful lot of organisations in this country, was very male-dominated and still is to a certain extent. It's gone further than some in terms of the numbers of females within the organisation, and they fulfil all the roles and ranks all the way up to commissioner. So, you know, that box is ticked in a way in terms of numbers and deployment of female officers. And it has had a very, very significant impact on the attitude and the organisational culture of the Met and all police services, because those female officers are around. They're in the car seat next to you. They're in the back of the van. They're in whatever it might be. They're in the interview rooms with you. They're everywhere. And so that has had a significant impact on the culture for the better, much for the better. And during my time, I saw that we sort of probably hit the point where there was a sort of tipping point for the numbers of females within the job, for them to be everywhere every day, and that was some years ago that was passed.
Yeah, and in fact, we do know actually some female officers have reported being subject to some of these comments as well. So, I mean, clearly not for some female officers, it's not a pleasant experience necessarily being in these environments. But I did want to ask you, you know, you mentioned that this could be a reflection of sort of the police being a male-dominated field, but is it right that we should expect our police officers in particular, because they're there to protect and serve the public, in particular, we should expect the highest standards, we should almost be applying higher standards to the police than any other male-dominated field in terms of not having these attitudes in the industry?
That is the case. This has only come to light because the police are subject to higher levels of scrutiny and higher standards required of them than in other organisations. What other organisation is there where a complaint about an inappropriate relationship between a member of that organisation and a member of the public would result in the police officer having their phone seized, forensically examined, and then that snowballing onto other officers as well? That's not going to happen in any other context, and it's quite right that the police are subject to these higher levels of scrutiny, but we must acknowledge that, and we would be foolish to think that we can achieve perfection and that we can totally eliminate these sorts of things because the police officers are drawn from society. And therefore, if you take a pragmatic and realistic view, and I know you both sort of subscribe to that approach, if you take a pragmatic approach to this, you're going to have a police service. If it reflects the people it serves, it's going to reflect the bad bits as well as the good bits. And these sorts of things go on within ordinary society. You only have to look around you in any real context in our public space.
I bet none of them would speak like that around their wives or partners. They probably wouldn't be tolerated. I don't know. I'm slightly
Absolutely
not with
right.
you when you say that, within society, that's why. So therefore, it's. I've not heard people talk like that. I don't know people who talk about chloroforming women to try and sort of, knock them out so they can have sex with them. I don't know people who talk about killing black babies, I'll be honest with you. I think, frankly, it's disgusting. And really and truly, it's got to, at work or anywhere I am, and as you said, that there should be held to higher standards. Well, they're not even at the standard of any other organisation that I've ever been in, to be honest with you. And I've never heard such an awful and offensive narrative in any industry. So I actually think that they are beneath everybody else in that respect, many of the officers who are behaving like that. And I have no idea how this actually happened. And I think the police force have got a big job on their hands. I mean, what would you say they should be doing now to move forward?
Don't make the mistake of there being no evidence in any other organisation of meaning that there's no problem there. The police service, as I say, is subject to more scrutiny. Yes, absolutely, it is disgusting and it's disgraceful and it shouldn't be tolerated. It won't be tolerated. It isn't tolerated. It isn't the standards of the organisation. It is way, way, way below those. And when it comes to light, it will be dealt with, and officers that are culpable will be disciplined or dismissed or whatever. And that has happened in this case. But when we look at the organisational change and the attitudinal change, anybody that knows anything about that, and I was involved in the community race relations training and all the stuff around the Lawrence Inquiry around 2000, anyone that knows about changing attitudes will know it's something that cannot be done by issuing a memo or issuing a video from the boss. It is something that has to be lived and breathed by every member of that organisation. And that takes an awful lot of time to, first of all, correct those attitudes and demonstrate the correct attitudes to all the individuals within that organisation, and then constant reinforcement by middle managers like sergeants and inspectors and such like. Well, we've got far fewer sergeants and inspectors now than we had before following the cuts. They have been disproportionately cut. I'm told that this particular unit at Charing Cross, there was one inspector for 100 officers. Well, I was one inspector for about 35 officers, and that was difficult enough trying to keep a handle on everything and make sure that none of them were going astray. And I relied on my sergeants. Well, I have 4 or 5 sergeants.
I can imagine
there's that many on this team.
I can imagine, obviously, staffing levels don't help, but the attitude is still a bit out of order. In terms of these officers in particular, do you think that they should be made a real example of? And also, finally, do you think that Cressida Dick should actually go as a result of these allegations and these behaviours?
The officers involved have, so far as I can see, they've been made an example of. Officers now all know without any shadow of a doubt, if you've got this sort of stuff going around on WhatsApp groups and social media that's you're responsible for, if and when that comes to light, you'll be gone. And that is fairly clear. And I'm not sure what else can be done in relation to that. In relation to Cressida Dick, she has had a hell of a time since she took over. She took over at a time when the Met was already in crisis, not of the Met's doing, as a result of the 25% cuts to budgets, which has happened over the last decade. It was in crisis. It didn't have enough officers to do everything properly 10 years ago. And they took 25% away and the workload went up. So it's deep in crisis already. And that is beyond the power of the Commissioner to do anything about. She can't stop the demand. She can't increase the budget. All she can do is say, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do fewer things, but we're going to do them better. And she can't really do that either, because as soon as she tries anything like that, and she and previous commissioners have tried it over the last couple of decades, they get told, no, you can't possibly not do that. And so we've got this situation where she's got a set of circumstances she can do nothing about, and things are going wrong. And I suspect
Peter, is
she
that a
sat
yes
there
or no then?
10 years
Should she
ago
go,
and
yes or
saw
no?
all this coming. Sorry,
Should
say
she
again?
go? So is that a yes or no? Should she go?
With all
Yes or
things
no?
taken together, I think we're pretty close.
Okay.
I take that as
I don't know what to take that
as a yes from you, Peter. Peter,
you.
Kirkham, thank you so
personal
much
choice.
we do have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your insight. We appreciate it. 22 years experience there in the Met Police.